All right, ISK, if you know me, you know that why I was so distracted last week. I even mentioned it in the video that, go watch it. Go familiarize yourself with week 7, even though I just dropped it like the other day. I had recorded it on time, but I spent the majority of the week fighting boxes in my apartment. The shipment is now put away, if you want to ask. Thank you. It was a good endeavor. I was also spending as much time as possible sending messages and support and pacing around my apartment, watching my former volleyball team do quite well and actually win ISK. Also was representing our coaching staff here. Rushke took home his 11 billionth cross country in a row and did awesome with track. And Rennie actually probably had one of the coaching performances of the year. I think we've all been in those situations where you walk in the gym day one and have like nobody coming back and no one, very few at least, in terms of skill sets in major positions. So the fact that Rennie even got himself into a medal game, I think, deserves a round of applause. But enough of thinking that things were awesome last week. We could move on from ISK. Week 8 brought us a lot of ups and downs, some disappointments, some injuries especially that are going to be quite pivotal, especially as we look at entering the back half of the fantasy season. And a lot to be excited about for week 9. The Germans are getting a game. We're going to watch actually hopefully a decent one on our time zone, which is always exciting. But let's take a deep breath and let's go back and revisit what happened in week 8. Week 8 in the NFL brought with it a ton of action as per usual and a lot of league implications, which we'll get to. But first story that we got to talk about, and really the main one I want to talk about, quarterbacks. They were a massive issue this week, not just as in they're always an issue because they're so tied to our league in terms of that position, the wide receiver, tight end position, and to an extent running back as well. But with injuries, in-game injuries being a big one. We'll get to the list of people who are backups that we knew were starting. But if you were watching the Falcons game, you saw Heineke. If you're watching the Steelers game, Trubisky got in there, which I don't know if you're happy or sad with Pickett. Mini is probably the big one. Minnesota lost Cousins, looks like for the year. The calmest Achilles injury I've ever seen. Just kind of stopped, said, I'm screwed, went out and wished everyone well. So Hall was in there. Stafford went down for the Rams and Rippon had to come in. And then in one of the best name-related NFL moments of my lifetime, I did not know he was even because if you think of in the Giants situation, they're already onto their backup with Tyrod Taylor. He gets hurt, and out comes Tommy DeVito. And if you have not seen Goodfellas and that name didn't ring a bell, stop what you're doing right now. Go watch Goodfellas and realize why I was so excited that this was happening. And it was going to go one of the two ways. Either you were going to get Tommy DeVito, the loose cannon, the hot-tempered, the crazy, the aggressive Tommy DeVito, right? The one that wants to know if you are amusing him. You get the quote. Or the other one was Billy Batts right, and he just needs to grab a shoe shine kit. Turns out we're going shoe shine because Tommy DeVito and the Giants offense in terms of the quarterback position had a net negative 9 yards on the game if you include all of the sacks that they took. So he might not have Joe Pesci. They might want to see what Joe Pesci's up to. He might do a better job in week 9 if they have some similar health issues. But aside from that, we know there's a lot of quarterbacks that are coming in. We knew of Will Levis for the Titans in one of the coolest games, the Advertising Bowl. It was Mayo versus Mustard. Will Levis, if you do not know, rookie quarterback, but he was notorious in the offseason for putting mayonnaise in his coffee and putting it on social media because it's social media, so people care about that kind of crap. I believe it's Hallman's jumped on it and has him in an advertising campaign against Atlanta and Bijan Robinson, which if you haven't actually heard, Bijan's not how you're supposed to pronounce his first name, but that's how he insists it's pronounced because of his Dijon Mustard contract. So we had the Mayo versus Mustard Bowl. Mayo did take over and Levis looked good. If you type in Levis, though, into any Apple product, it autocorrects to Levi's. So expect a possible trade to San Francisco with the Levi's Stadium and maybe an endorsement coming up. He was your positive story of a backup that you knew that was coming in. But for people with young quarterbacks, I could complain about Love. That's not a backup. He's actually the starter and just plays that badly. But we know the Bears, Fields was still out. So the quarterback I will now refer to as Teabag because I think it's easier than enunciating his name. He was starting. The Browns are on the PJ Walker experiment still. He was starting and not doing great. That interception on 3rd and 3 that effectively cost them the game when everyone in the world is asking to hand off the ball. You have to think, if you are calling plays, if you call the play that the opposing fan base is going to be happy that you're calling, maybe don't call it. There you go. Free advice for the Browns coaches. And just in general, quarterback underperforming. You really can't ding any quarterback who gets hurt halfway through. I know you're probably swearing at them if you had them starting for you, but an injury is an injury. There were at least a couple big names, though, that just massively underproduced and started and finished the game. Jimmy G's hasn't been a household name this year, but he didn't even get 5 points on Monday night, which is why Devontae Adams couldn't stop throwing his helmet. But probably the biggest surprise, our 1-2 from last week in quarterbacks. Mahomes was our number one last week. This week, he scored in most quarterback formats under 6 points. Some formats have slightly different kind of measurements. And Lamar Jackson, who was the quarterback 2 and went off last week as well, had under 12. So not some consistency, and certainly when we get to our top quarterback performers, when I get to the matchups, some are the normal faces, some are definitely new. This does lead to an interesting part in both the NFL, which just did its trade deadline. No real kind of sparks. Dobbs going to Minnesota would be the only one that really impacts our league. No like McCaffrey like last year when that trade happened for those who were in the league then. But it mirrors kind of what's going on in our fantasy leagues. There's a lot of teams that started off hot that are starting to fizzle and might need to look to pick people up. People that started slow that are now starting to rise. And it's not too late yet. Both in the NFL, where essentially the AFC is evened out. The leader of every division is exactly 6-2. The only 7-1 left being Philly. We also lost our only team without a win. Carolina won, and the NFC is a little bit more gargled. But take a look at your league because it's not quite over yet. There's still deals to be made. Our trade deadlines are still up and running, and you might need them heading in for this week. So we're going back overseas or to my side of the pond in a super interesting game. We got Mahomes, who, if you were wondering why he didn't play that well, if you saw afterwards, he was actually quite sick. They were trying to rule him out of the game beforehand, but he insisted on playing, which is hilarious if you start thinking of how restricted COVID restrictions were only a couple of years ago. And now it's just like, if you can walk, you can play. That was partially due to, or partially contributed to his underperformance. He now has to take a plane. I believe they're flying on Thursday, so depending when this video goes out. Whereas they're playing the Dolphins, who apparently are already here. This game is in Germany, so it's going to alter when it's played. It's the early game on Sunday before the early games. And we also have 4 teams on a bye. If you've looked at your team roster already, we know we went back to the bye weeks after only week off. It's Denver, San Francisco, Jacksonville, and Detroit. So aside from all the quarterback issues, we've got 2 of the better running backs. McCaffrey, who is traditionally the number 1 running back in most formats. And then Etienne, who's been phenomenal in the previous couple weeks and is having a great season. They're both sitting down. 3 of the top 10 tight ends, I think 3 of actually the top 8 tight ends in most standard formats are sitting down this week. So lots of moves to be made. Maybe more eventful than the actual trade deadline will be our league's general trade deadlines, but let's see what happens. Anyway, that's enough from the NFL. Let's get on to last week's matchups and see how we fared. In what we knew was going to be one of the most pivotal matchups of the week, we had 2 of our top guys going at it. And we knew that one would rise, one might fall. In this particular case, if it's going to happen, at least both scored over 160. And Gene, congratulations, you are our highest scorer of the week. So if you're in an emphatic matchup, that's the way you want to do it. Maxon, you can go back and start counting all the people that you would have beaten, get upset about it. But hey, 5-3, still not too bad, and you are still in the top 4. Let's take just a quick look on how it's done. In terms of Gene, you really just had everybody do something. In fact, I don't think TJ Hawkinson was our tight end 4. Detroit, I believe, was our defense 3. Other than that, you were outside of the top 5 in all positions. People like Waddle and Herbert were kind of sniffing at the end, almost getting in. But it didn't matter because everybody put up performances. When your worst performance is a running back who's 3 under their predicted and still gets you almost 12 points, not too shabby. I think in this case, I mean, even when you get a defense in the double digits and then you get a couple people in the 20s, I mean, your high score being Waddle at 27. And like I said, he's one of those people that was just outside, although this is kind of nice. If you had him last year, this was what he used to do in the last half of the season, where he would just kind of tail in and get a decent amount of carries a decent amount of catches and score some points there, which is nice to see. Yeah, if you can keep this up, you're going to be tough to beat because you're not necessarily dependent on any one person. Maxon, when you lose by this little, obviously it's going to be frustrating. Now, you did have a few more people in the top 5, I believe, or maybe actually not here. I think you were close as well. You have McCaffrey, who was our running back 2. And then actually you were in the same boat. You had some people sniffing around. I think the biggest thing for you was injuries. Had Cousins stayed in, I know he played most of the game, but maybe he would have caught another connection with Addison. That would have helped you out both ways. The big one was obviously Waller going down early. Really didn't help your cause. And then Cincinnati discovering they had an offense was great for Chase. It was not great for your defense. So you kind of put yourself in that spot. I know that's always a little bit more difficult. Taking a look at your bench, you both had some points there. I don't know. I mean, Gabe Dave getting in, but again, you just have to start looking as to who he would have gone in for. You did have Teabag there, Gene, but obviously your two quarterbacks did fine without him. Overall, good matchup. I mean, we'd much rather have two of our big swinging hammers here in the league going after each other and both scoring. So well done, Gene. You're now climbing up. You are tied for the top of the mountain here, although with points scored, you're in second. Kent, you're only a game out of this little run here, and as we're going to see when the league table shows up, you're still in fine position based on how things went last week. So best of luck next week again. But Gene, congratulations. I think it's your first or second time as the highest scoring overall. So well done, sir. In general, we had a pretty high scoring week, actually. I think there's 3 teams with 170 or over. In fact, if we scroll down, 4 teams, I apologize, because we're going to get to that matchup next. But we're quite close in a lot of scores, and then a bunch in the 160s, and then a few that certainly weren't. So Rushke, in any other week, you would have been our top scorer, but this isn't any other week. This is this week. Maddie, this is unlucky. 2 weeks in a row now you've scored, and you're suffering a little bit of a slide. So let's see how you can rebound. But first, before we get to that, let's look at how things went down. Kent, you were definitely almost like the light switch. You were either on or off. You had Myers. I mean, anyone in that Vegas offense, you were lucky to get points. Not so much. Your receivers didn't do a great job, obviously. But quarterbacks, in terms of Allen, I mean, you didn't actually start a second quarterback, so well done there. But Allen, the only one you scored, was our quarterback 3. Hill was in the top 5 as well. He was our 5th ranked receiver. Gus the Bus, the last couple weeks, has been in the top 5. He was number 3 at running back. And then Dallas's defense, that's been your bread and butter all year. They were the best started defense. There was a defense that actually could have outscored them, but I do not believe anyone played. If we look at our bench, I mean, you left the highest scoring, the second highest scoring receiver on your bench there, Kent. But other than that, you're dealing with some injuries. Maddie, you had a pretty good week, except for your wide receivers. It really was a Flowers and Nico that kind of let you down. Goddard, obviously, as well. But if you look at everybody else, your Philly special came in as it always does. AJ, I think it's his 5th or 6th week in a row with 125 yards and a touchdown. Hurts was just outside of our top 5. He was our quarterback 6. Eckler, that's the kind of performance I'm sure you thought you were going to be getting a lot more of. So if that's his best outing since he came back from injury, that's got to make you feel good. Obviously, Goddard, though, is still kind of trailing for you. You did have some points on the bench, but nothing I think that you're really kicking yourself over. So it's just time to regroup, take a look at the board, right? Make a plan for week 9 and see what you can do to stop the skid, Matty. In terms of you, Kent, you seem to be either the best person to play or the worst person to play. It depends on your on or off. So let's see if you can be a little more stable. You keep scoring in the 160s to 180s, you'll be just fine. In the highest scoring, I believe overall, and certainly the tightest matchup, Connor and Seamus fall again, second loss. Now they do have the tiebreaker over Gene, as we can see. They're still holding the belt, but now they're only holding on with one hand as Tim gets back to 500 with a massive performance, a fantastic performance. And let's see kind of how he did it. Quarterbacks were the name of the day. Now, Baker has been a massive pickup for you over the last couple weeks, but slinging Sammy Howell was our number 1, so congrats on that. I don't know if you expected me to say that in any given week, but he was our quarterback 1. Your receivers were hit or miss. Dotson, they discovered that he can catch with 2 hands and everything when he decides he can do so. He had a monster game. Obviously, the rest of your crew, not so much. Now, Laporta was top 5. He was our 5th best tight end, and Hall was just outside. I think he was the running back 6, I believe. But that was enough to get it done. Didn't have a whole lot on your bench to really make a stink, so you made all the right choices. And obviously, you do have to keep a look, and if Cup is going to keep with the lower volume, that might be slightly concerning as you are still nursing some of your injuries, as we can see. But well done, Tim. A win is a win. Connor and Seamus, obviously, you don't want to panic too much, but 2 losses for you is not the end of the world. This one's got to sting a little bit because within, I think it's like 2.6 something points. Now, you did have our wide receiver 1 in CD Lamb, which makes you feel great. You had our running back 1 in Gibbs, makes you feel great. So everything's amazing. You only started 1 quarterback, and that's the one that actually sunk you. So I think when you look back on this one, not only can you look back at you did have a massive amount of points on the bench, people you could have slid in, But realistically, I mean, you scored 170. You're going to win most matchups at 170. It's just unfortunate that it came the sick game that could have been the flu game a la Jordan for Mahomes, but instead it wasn't. He had a horrible one, worst game I think he's ever had as a starting quarterback in the league. That didn't help you out. One of the few times you can ever say this sentence: had you started Russell Wilson over Patrick Mahomes, you would have won, and I believe you would have been the top scorer in the whole league. So maybe just start doing that every week. Just put Wilson in and bench Mahomes. I think we'd all be fans of it. Even actually, you boldly, instead of putting, now I don't know if you would have put in Gibbs or Nakua, but you went one quarterback, and you are Mr. Quarterback. I don't know if that might have changed the fate as well. But hey, ifs and buts, candy nuts, we know how that goes. And ultimately, you're still top of the league. So who gives a crap, right? They're going to have to beat you again to get you to drop down. So unlucky on your part. Tim, well done, sir. Hopefully, maybe you can keep the momentum going and keep the 500 run and start to build up your second half here to make a run at the playoffs. But well done in week 8, buddy. In our battle of the basement, Dibbler says, no more, I will not be 10th, and puts Rennie back down after his one-game winning streak. How do you do so? I mean, he is going to, again, this is the theme of Dibbler's year, dealing with some injuries. Stafford, I don't know how long it's out for. It doesn't look like super serious, but him leaving the game a bit early did not help you out. Fortunately for you, Kittle was our tight end 1, so that did help you out. Etienne's been a massive boost for you over the past couple weeks. He was our running back 4 overall. Just in general, your French-sounding backfield, the French connection there. Charbonnet actually did get points for you this week. I mean, he's been hit or miss. Walker looked like he tweaked something there, so he might be getting some love. Devontae Smith, similar to what I said with Waddle. If you had him last year, he was always that great number 2 that sometimes got number 1 type points, and he looked like he was trying to battle for that again. But nobody else in their top 5, just they did enough to help you out. Geno did all right for you, would have been a bit better overall after Stafford, but certainly not as good as Ain't He Purdy. So well done, sir. 166 was enough to take it home. Rennie, you would have beaten some people. 134, not quite your predicted, but your quarterbacks were not the problem. Dax and Burrow came out huge. Dax was our quarterback 4, Burrow was our quarterback 5. I think where you fell short, your running backs, man, Pierce and Pacheco, after a couple good weeks, especially for Pacheco in a row, didn't really work out the way everyone in the world thought it was going to in Denver, as they shocked the Chiefs pretty heavily. And no one else really had a lot of rhythm. Your wide receivers were hit or miss, but mostly hit here with just Palmer kind of going down. On the bench, you didn't leave a whole lot. It would have been nice. Logan Thomas randomly would have been better than Kelsey, but again, against Denver, who in the world is going to think that's the case? And after last week, when you were struggling to start anybody at quarterback, you must feel good that your bye weeks are at least done. So that's a positive momentum for you. As we're going to see, it's not like everyone's taken off at the top. There's still some games left to play. Everyone still has a run at this thing. So best of luck in bouncing back. Jeff, after a couple rough weeks and a couple injury-laden weeks, welcome back to the winning side, pal. In the worst win, I'll take it. I don't care. I'll take anything I can at this point because this league is getting tight. And if anything I can do in the stay in the top 4, I will. Marco, thanks for the freebie. I made a joke last week that I'm sure most people won't see because a lot of people might not see next week. You have had people go off on you. And 150 is almost going off, except for this week when it's not. And there was people in the 160s, 170s. I didn't actually have a monster week. I was just over predicted. What really helped me out, to be completely honest, was apparently I'm a Saints guy. Now, Olave didn't do it for me. He did just enough to be okay. But Hill as a tight end pickup was our tight end 3. So that's pretty exceptional. Pretty happy about that one. And then Kamara, again, is our running back 5. He's had a pretty good run since coming back. Obviously, my quarterback's disappointed. Lawrence always looks good in the game, and then he just doesn't get fantasy points because he just doesn't get that many touchdowns. And Jackson did not look good against Arizona, which is not fantastic. Gus the Bus took all of his touchdowns I was hoping he would get. Fortunately for me, I could go through person by person and say that was disappointing, that was disappointing, that was disappointing. But it was the old people, Thielen and Evans stood up for Marco. Other than that, not so good. He's like he He gets the runoff from the DiCaprio yacht. It's 26 or over. Those are the only people that score for him. Everybody else that should score just doesn't. Adams would be the one I'd be the most frustrated with, just because that Vegas situation doesn't look to be getting better anytime soon. And unfortunately for you, even though he was on everyone's list of someone who might get traded, he did not. So that's going to kind of hurt you. Love, as someone who has him in another league and watched him, just never watch him play, because he looks like he's not going to score any points. I don't know how he even almost got up to his predicteds. And like I said, this is coming from someone who has him and has started him in other leagues. Just tough to watch. You did have Wilson on the bench. Would have helped you out a little bit, but that's not going to, if you can't get to 100 points in a week where people are popping off 160s and 170s, that is no bueno, kind sir. So thanks for the W. I appreciate it. Go back to your scoring ways, and here's hoping for a better second half where you get a little bit more luck, pal. Before we get to the Week 9 matchups, just a quick look at the table. Like I'm mentioning, things are pretty tight. So, Rennie, I know you're discouraged. It's not looking super great, but you're not out of it yet, pal. I've done the math. It actually, if you go on a run, you can be just fine. So that means everyone's got a shot. You just got to start putting together a couple wins in a row. Obviously, Marco, your 5-game losing skid's got to change pretty quick. I'm riding my current wave, and so is Gene at the 4 in a row. So technically, we have a 3-way tie for first. But in terms of point value, there's quite a bit different, so we'll see how that works out. Kent with both Kents just on the outside looking in with some high scores, but not necessarily just quite enough wins. And obviously Matty and Tim going back and forth, just fighting the 500 grind. Matty probably taking it the worst with the 2-game skid. So how are we going to bounce back heading into Week 9? Let's check out our matchups. Remember, if we learned anything, it doesn't matter how many points you score. It matters how many points your opponents score. I'm in a pretty important one. Tim, after a big win, so he obviously showed he can take down anyone, so I got to watch out for that one. Jeff's on a run, and like I said, Kent either scores a lot or he doesn't. Woody, good luck against Marco. He's either going to score a bunch or he's not. But one thing you're going to know, if you play Marco, your team goes off. That's just the only guarantee I can give. So you're going to score a ton of points. Gene's going to hopefully capitalize on Rennie and see if he can take advantage. And we've got another tight matchup here. 1-game difference between them. I think this one's going to end up being quite tight. You can't trust the point values now. As I said in kind of the intro, we do have a lot of buys. 4 buys. We've also got a lot of quarterback injuries, so there's going to be a lot of movement on the board this week, I would imagine. Some adds and pickups and some duct tape trying to fix some holes, so we'll see how that bodes. Either way, dudes, do remember we are back to European games, so it's actually, for those on this side of the pond, it's kind of nice. We get an afternoon game, and it's supposed to be a good one unless they're all jet-lagged, Miami and Kansas City. So if Mahomes is still sick, or like I said, if jet lag rears its ugly head, maybe that one will be a pug-fugly one in Germany. But here's hoping for a good one and a good Week 9 that kind of helps us really springboard into our second half and our home stretch when it comes to our fantasy life. Thanks, crew. I hope you do watch this one and maybe even help me out and go watch the other one, just because, I made it. I recorded it. It was the shipment. It was ISK, tons of stuff on the go. Just, it's fine. But either way, best of luck and enjoy Week 9.